Welcome to Life Stories, where we share powerful, real-life experiences that will resonate with you. Today's story is about a woman who faced the ultimate betrayal by her own family, a story of manipulation, greed, and the courage to stand up for herself. When her sister discovered she had $15 million, everything changed. The manipulation began, and her family turned against her in ways she never expected. But through it all, she learned a profound lesson about love, boundaries, and the price of success. Stay with us as we dive into this incredible journey. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to start today's story. It was Christmas Eve, and I had just walked into my parents' home in the suburbs of Chicago. The scent of cinnamon and roasted turkey filling the air, a stark contrast to the cold that had gripped the city. There was something about the holiday season that always seemed to carry a certain tension, like a carefully constructed facade of joy over a simmering undercurrent of unspoken words and unmet expectations. I shook off my coat, trying to shake off the cold as well, and walked into the living room. The warmth of the house was suffocating, but there was something comforting in it too. My mother, Carol, had outdone herself this year. The dining table was lavishly set with gold-trimmed napkins and sparkling crystal glasses. A Christmas tree loomed in the corner, almost absurdly oversized, its branches touching the ceiling. But despite the beauty of it all, there was an unsettling heaviness that lingered. I adjusted my coat and made my way toward the living room, where my family was gathered. As expected, Emily, my younger sister, was already the center of attention, of course. Dressed in a red designer dress, she leaned dramatically against the fireplace, her laughter echoing as she regaled everyone with tales of her latest luxury shopping haul. "Oh my God, you wouldn't believe the deal I got on this bag," she gushed, holding up a leather purse like it was the most important thing in the world. "It was on sale for $1,800. Can you believe that steal?" I forced a polite smile, already feeling the familiar sense of alienation. It wasn't that I didn't love my family, but every Christmas felt like a performance, one I was never cast in the leading role of. As I entered the room, my father, Daniel, barely looked up from his glass of bourbon. His eyes narrowed in quiet contentment. "Hey Rachel, glad you could make it," he said, his voice low, almost dismissive. "Of course," I replied, keeping my tone as neutral as I could muster. I wasn't in the mood for small talk. I just wanted to get through the night. The evening went exactly as it always did. Emily basked in the attention. My mother doted on her, and Daniel sat back, sipping his drink and offering the occasional nod of approval. I had long learned how to blend into the background, but tonight was different. It was as if something was off, like a storm was brewing just under the surface. I noticed Emily's eyes keep darting toward my purse. Her gaze lingered longer than usual on my bag, and I could feel a strange, unsettling eagerness radiating from her. It was the kind of look a predator might give its prey, waiting for the right moment to strike. But I brushed it off at first, telling myself I was imagining things. Then, it happened. I was in the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of wine, when the shriek echoed through the house, cutting through the chatter like a knife. "Oh my God," Emily's voice rang out, high-pitched and theatrical. I froze, dread settling in my stomach like a cold, living thing. $15 million? Are you freaking kidding me?" Emily's voice carried through the house, sharp with disbelief, and something else. Entitlement. It took me a moment to process what was happening, to realize that she was holding my laptop, the screen angled in such a way that everyone could see the balance displayed on it. My heart sank. I hadn't intended for anyone to see that number. It wasn't meant for anyone but me. Silence fell over the room. I stepped into the living room, my pulse hammering in my ears. All eyes were on me. Emily stood in the center of the room, clutching my laptop like it was a trophy. "Tell me this is a joke," she demanded, her voice laced with something far more dangerous than disbelief, something far worse: entitlement. My blood turned to ice. The room erupted in chaos. My mother gasped, pressing a hand to her chest as though she were about to faint. My father tightened his grip on his drink. his eyes narrowing. The guests murmured in hushed, scandalized tones. You've been sitting on millions while mom and dad are struggling? Emily's voice was shrill, accusing. How could you not tell us? I felt my throat go dry as I tried to maintain composure. That's my money, Emily, my business, my work. But she wasn't listening. You let us suffer, my mother wailed, playing her part perfectly. We've been drowning in bills. And you never once thought to help us. She was the picture of a wronged mother. But I knew better. They had never been in financial trouble. Emily's reckless spending and their refusal to say no to her had created the strain. Gregory exhaled sharply, shaking his head in disappointment. We are your parents, Rachel, he said, his voice low and controlled. We raised you, and you just keep this fortune to yourself? My fists clenched, my nails digging into my palms. How dare they? How dare they pretend that they were the ones struggling when they had all the resources they needed? They had never once asked how I was doing. Not once. Not until they saw the money. Until they saw that I had something they could take. Emily's smirk was barely concealed behind her feigned outrage. And you weren't even going to tell us? I exhaled sharply. I didn't think I needed to. My success isn't your paycheck. The words landed with a slap. The silence that followed felt like a pressure building in my chest, suffocating me. My mother gasped, clutching at her pearl necklace. Ungrateful child, she cried. Family takes care of each other. Rachel, Gregory said, his tone hardening. You've forgotten that. It was all so predictable. The guilt tripping, the manipulation. It was so painfully rehearsed. But I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of an outburst. Not yet. Excuse me, I said, standing slowly, trying to control the anger that was bubbling up inside me. I need to step outside. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind the shocked silence, the whispers, and the murmurs. As I walked toward the hallway, I felt the weight of their eyes on me. But I didn't stop. I couldn't let them break me. Not yet. But I knew this was far from over. I barely made it to the hallway before I heard footsteps behind me. Rachel, sweetheart. My mother's voice was suddenly soft. Too soft, calculated. Don't walk away like this. I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers to my temples, trying to hold on to the calm that was slipping away. I turned around, and there she stood, my mother. Carol, her hands clasped together like a grieving widow. Her eyes were glistening with fake tears. But they couldn't fool me anymore. Emily hovered behind her, arms crossed, biting her lip, playing the role of the wounded sister. And then there was Daniel, lingering near the dining table, swirling the last of his bourbon in his glass. His face unreadable. It was as if this was all part of a carefully rehearsed script. And I had been cast in a role I no longer wished to play. We need to talk, my mother continued, her voice almost pleading now. Let's not do this in front of everyone. I clenched my jaw, already knowing what this was going to be. My heart was pounding in my chest. But I wasn't going to let them manipulate me any longer. I followed her into the sitting room, a space that was reserved for guests but rarely used. And Emily and Daniel followed, closing the door behind them. As soon as the door clicked shut, the facade cracked. My mother sighed dramatically, sinking into the couch as if she were about to faint. Rachel, darling, she began, her voice trembling with fake sincerity. We're not asking for all of your money. Just a little something. A family support fund, perhaps? I stared at her, disbelief running through me. A what? Gregory cleared his throat, trying to sound reasonable, though his words were far from it. You know, something fair. Maybe set aside a few million so we can all feel secure. I felt my stomach twist, my body bristling with anger. They actually believed this was a reasonable request. You mean so Emily can keep shopping and going on luxury vacations? I snapped, crossing my arms. Emily's face flickered between shock and insult. But she didn't say anything. She just stared at me, the same entitled expression on her face. Wow, Rachel, Emily said, her voice dripping with fake hurt. I didn't know you thought so poorly of me. I let out a bitter laugh. I know you, Emily. Don't pretend you care. My mother's face fell, her carefully constructed disappointment now visible. This isn't about Emily, it's about family, she said, her voice gaining a false tremor of emotion. It's about us supporting each other. Funny, I said, my voice low and controlled. You never seemed too worried about supporting me when I was working 3 jobs in college. When I had to take out loans just to survive. Where were you then? Eleanor opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She was silent for a moment. And then Gregory sighed, rubbing his temples. We're not trying to start a fight, Rachel, he said, his voice a bit softer. But think about it. You have $15 million. You could change our lives overnight. Emily nodded eagerly. Exactly. You wouldn't even miss it. I could feel my nails digging into my palm as I clenched my fists, trying to keep my composure. And if I say no? I asked, my voice cold. There was a moment of silence. My mother blinked, as though she hadn't even considered that possibility. We just don't understand why you'd want to hoard all that money when your family, your blood, could use some help. I let out a humorless laugh. Oh, so now we're talking about blood? Eleanor's face twisted into something sharper, though she tried to maintain her sweet, grieving mother act. You're being cruel. No, Mom, I said, my voice steady and final. I'm being honest. The tension in the room was suffocating. But I didn't back down. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. They had never cared about my success until they realized it could benefit them. I've thought about this, I said, finally, and my answer is no. My mother let out a wounded noise. But I turned and walked out of the room before she could say anything more. The door shut behind me with a sense of finality. But I knew this wasn't the end. The storm was only beginning. As I made my way back to the kitchen, the anger that had been simmering beneath the surface flared. But I didn't let it show. This wasn't just a family dispute, it was a battle for my autonomy. And I wasn't about to let them take it from me. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of tension. I stayed in the kitchen, needing a space to breathe and think. The taste of wine felt like poison in my mouth as my mind raced, replaying the conversation over and over again. I had known they were selfish. But I never imagined they would go this far. It wasn't just the money. They were trying to take everything, my work, my business, my independence. As I poured myself another glass of wine, I heard the familiar sound of high heels clicking against the floor. Emily appeared in the doorway. Her posture too casual, her smile too rehearsed. She leaned against the counter, as if we were just two sisters catching up over a drink. Look, I'm sorry. Okay, she said, her voice softer than it had been earlier. I got caught up in the moment. I was jealous. I raised an eyebrow, studying her carefully. This wasn't the same Emily I had grown up with. The girl who once idolized me was now someone I barely recognized. Wrapped up in her own entitlement. Jealous? I echoed, my voice flat. She hesitated, chewing on her lip. Yeah, I don't want us to fight. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped my lips. You don't want to fight? You just exposed my finances to everyone and accused me of being a terrible daughter. Emily shifted uncomfortably, her face flickering between regret and something more calculating. I know, and I was wrong, but, Rachel, if you really want to prove you're not mad at me, you could help me out a little. I felt the room freeze. I turned slowly, putting my wine glass down on the counter. What do you mean by that? She pulled out her phone, showing me a banking app. The screen was illuminated with an open transfer request. Just a little something, she said lightly, as if it was no big deal. You know, just enough to get me back on my feet. A few thousand, nothing huge. But it would really help. My heart dropped as I looked at the screen. The mask was slipping. The charade was over. This wasn't about a family support fund. This was Emily, once again, trying to manipulate me into giving her something. Something she believed she was entitled to. Just because she was family. I set the phone down on the counter with a quiet click. No, I said simply. Her face twisted in frustration. Her voice rising. Oh, come on, Rachel, you owe me. You've always had everything. Why can't you just share a little? I looked at her, my anger bubbling under the surface. Oh you? Oh you for what exactly? For your tantrums? For your endless shopping sprees? You don't get to guilt trip me into giving you money just because you want it. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw the faintest flicker of guilt. But it quickly vanished, replaced by the familiar smirk. You're so selfish, she spat, her words dripping with venom. You're just like everyone else, rich and too good for us. I stood there, staring at her in disbelief. I've worked for everything I have, Emily, and you want me to just hand it over because you think you deserve it? I didn't think you'd be this cold, she muttered, shaking her head in disgust. I was done with this. I didn't need to waste any more energy on her. Good night, Emily, I said, turning my back on her and grabbing my purse. She didn't say anything more. I didn't wait for her to react. But as I walked down the hallway, I felt the familiar knot in my stomach tightening. This wasn't just a fight between sisters. This was a war, one I had been dragged into unwillingly. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power, about control. They had tried to take my life, my business, and my future, and I wasn't going to let them win. As I made my way out of the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. They had only just started showing their true colors, and I had to be prepared for whatever came next. In the end, it wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my life, my choices, and my peace. My family had tried to manipulate me, guilt trip me, and use every tactic they could think of to control me. But I had learned a profound lesson through it all. Some people only love you when you're easy to control. When you're giving them something they want. I didn't owe them anything. My success, my hard work, and my dedication were mine and mine alone. And I wouldn't let them take it from me. After everything that happened, I knew I had to make a choice. Continue allowing them to break me down, or walk away and stand strong in my own power. I chose the latter. I walked away from that toxic cycle. And while it wasn't easy, it was freeing. I had the chance to rebuild my life without their weight dragging me down. It was painful, but the relief that came with setting boundaries was worth it. And as for them, they would have to live with the consequences of their actions. They had tried to take everything from me. But in the end, they couldn't take away my strength, my independence, or my peace. So, if you're watching this and feeling the same way, stuck in a situation where your family or anyone close to you is trying to take what's yours, remember this: you don't have to sacrifice your happiness or your future for anyone. Set your boundaries, protect your peace, and never let anyone make you feel like you owe them anything you've worked hard for. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories. Your peace and success belong to you. And we'll keep sharing stories to inspire you to stand strong and live your truth. Stay tuned for more.